page were we on with the Communist Manifesto?
I was trying. Go ahead.
16. I think it was
What?
16, because that's where the last I highlighted.
Every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. And that is something that, like, you know, that is very true. Like, people expect you not to do anything that doesn't contribute to an income or something, you know, like the arts.
It's also the idea that at one point maybe there was a golden age of art for art's sake and marriage for love's sake and so forth. But what, if ever that did exist, really, that's definitely over now. Everything is done for profit.
I would say there's a possibility that, you know, maybe there was art that was based within a community. You know, not necessarily like art of like this art that it's grand, you know, like a Sistine Chapel or anything like that, but art that was you know, passed down from maybe a community from one generation to another. And I think that is probably, I would guess, the type of art that maybe has been stripped away.
The really interesting thing about art, like outsider art, is that mental patients have historically been told to do art as part of therapy. So, but then they're also locked away and hidden from the world. So there's like this outsider art where there were always these kind of hidden, unseen celebrities in the art world that were basically, their psychiatrists took their art and made money off it in exhibits by, like, look at these mental patients' art. And, you know, like Van Gogh was like an art, you know, he was in an asylum as well. And like, that's kind of like, that always, like, that when people say like art that's not for money, like that's kind of what I think. And it's ironic because some of that art has made the most money for people, not the artists though, but you know, kind of that messed up. But
I was thinking art for art's sake, like, you know, like if you go to California or any ethnic neighborhood really, but like Southern California a lot, like in the barrios, all the murals on the walls.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. But like, I used to see it all the time when I lived there.
New York City too, like that's just known just for, like, you know, graffiti, you know, murals on the side of the buildings. You know, growing up, you would just see the trains just tagged up, and some of the stuff was just beautiful. I mean,
yeah,
but
I mean,
that's the
Basquiat
community art that I was thinking of.
He was like the 80s New York artist, right? He was actually homeless, living on the streets.
You're talking about Basquiat?
Yeah.
Basquiat, yeah. Jean-Michel Basquiat, French, but also black. And Jamaican, and then I don't remember. But he also spoke French. But anyways, the point was, he was like trilingual or something. But they like discovered him because his art was all over New York already, and then he became this like incredibly famous celebrity with Andy Warhol, you know, hanging out with Andy Warhol and stuff. But it's also like, and that is also tragic too, was like seeing him actually, like, it was like his downfall in a way, because like it basically destroyed his soul. Like they just kind of used him, and he, during like the documentaries, you can see the progression of how he feels like he's being exploited more and more as a rich artist, as opposed to when he was on the streets doing graffiti tagging and stuff. It's sad.
But the problem would then be that it's really somebody who might have roots in a communal art world who is being molded into a bourgeois genius type, which is the way that artists are becoming commodifiable, you know.
Exactly,
and that's the
right.
way that bourgeois look at the art world, is the genius that has the divine inspiration, or more, that has that inspiration from within himself or herself. But most art historians seem to, well, there is I don't know most, but there is a counter tradition in art history that says that all the great art that we celebrate and have tried to dangle into this bourgeois mold of having identifiable geniuses really is a communal, collaborative project. So there's one book about Paris in the 11th century by a historian, Jacques Le Goff, where he's describing all the stuff that's going on in Paris. And one of it is, of course, the architectural revival and an artistic revival, but it's also a political revolution. The first time that the King of France has to give the city self-government to some extent. There's the takeoff of the crafts, the forming of guilds, and people move back and forth between the sphere of the crafts, of the artisans, of the guilds that organize themselves democratically, but also to create stuff and become artistic in the process, into the universities, into the arts, into the building of Gothic cathedrals. So it's basically a rewriting of the history of the High Middle Ages from the ground up and saying, no, really, it's the working class of Paris that makes this possible. That's the cauldron where all these artistic forms in architecture and whatnot, and even like the heresies, you know, Pierre Abelard and his challenges to the Catholic hierarchy, that all is flourishing in that space. And why? Because you have a vibrant communal culture that is undergirding it. And same with the way Nietzsche talks about Athens and Greek culture. Also the idea that the chorus is in Greek tragedy the representation of the people. It's the mirror image of the people and their creative spirit. And in the tragedy on the stage, it works through their experience. So to really commodify art and to detach it, to make it the possession of one individual, like just like you take the labor of the individual and alienate it as wage labor, that probably would be one way in which you can devalue art or make it bourgeois or make it non-communal.
To take it out of the context and make it the creation of a single thought and a single
genius.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And I mean the one, ironically,
the myth
Nietzsche,
of the genius.
Go ahead.
The myth of the genius. That's kind of a topic in itself.
And ironically, Nietzsche and Wagner, who have this image as crazy geniuses themselves, were in their better days proponents of that communal approach to making art. Like Wagner opera initially is a revolutionary project before he becomes utterly about nationalism and anti-Semitism. In 1848, he's talking about opera as a collaboration between singers, writers, stage designers, and so forth. So it's like the whole revolutionary moment of 1848. Everybody meets on the stage in the opera house. They built the opera house from the ground up. It's like the people themselves celebrating the accomplishment, you know, that is immediately compatible with anything in the 1920s you get in Russia, you know, during the Revolution.
Oh, this is off topic, but kind of not. Okay. Yeah. At the rally on Sunday, there was in the middle of the Proud Boys with the police and on, you know, everybody, somebody in the background was playing a live performance of Cabaret, that Willkommen song from Cabaret. And from, like, if you know the plot of the movie, it's like 1920s Nazi Germany.
Oh boy.
In like a cabaret with Liza Minnelli. It's like this film, and somebody was live performing at the rally the music on a piano and microphone. And then I recorded it, and I was like, this is so surreal, man. I'm like, this is weird. Okay, you guys
are we going on to next?
Yeah. So we had talked about how art and family love and art becomes casualties of this universal commodification under the bourgeoisie. Who wants to go next?
I can read next.
Yeah.
The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found its fitting complement in the most slothful indulgence. It has been first to show what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades.
So it's basically the great accomplishments of humanity that people will point to. And that pales by comparison with the accomplishments of the bourgeoisie in its brief history. And they're talking, of course, about exploration, like taking land and stuff from the non-Europeans, but also even in 1848, I mean, there were still so many steps to be taken for architecture and transportation technology, but it was already stunning compared to what they had before, you know, coaches and such like.
Yeah, the 1848, that's the railways and stuff when they were establishing, right?
Yeah. And it's really still very fragmentary, but you can see the shape of things to come. And why is that? Because the bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. Conservation of the old modes of production in unaltered form was, on the contrary, the first condition of existence for all earlier industrial classes. Constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguished the bourgeois epoch from all earlier ones. All fixed, fast, frozen relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All new formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into air, all that is holy is profaned, and man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. So this is any reactions to this paragraph?
Yeah, everybody wants to make a buck quicker, so they keep coming up with more ways to like reinvent the wheel so it's cheaper and faster. Yeah, that's what I got from it. It's
and they have
not the greater good. They just want to make more money off it.
And if it helps if it's good for humanity, if it helps the greater good, so be it. You know, that's nice. It's a marketing thing, but the point is, it's built into the system that it has to change everything all the time. It is built into the profit motive that drives the system. All previous systems had a built-in conservatism, putting a premium on leaving things be as they are. And this new system has a built-in revolutionary impetus. It has to make the previous model obsolete so that it can be replaced with a new one. You know, all this talk about disruption of industries and reinventing this and that on a basically 5-year cycle. Everything has to be just torn down and rebuilt. And that's because you have capital always trying to find ways to valorize itself. But what's the cultural consequence of this?
You get the iPhone 20 or whatever for twice as much. That kind of shit.
Although I think Marx and Engels probably would have thought that people look at that and think of it as, you know, people recognizing, oh my goodness, this, what we're seeing here is the creative, productive powers of humanity on full display. Because if you can't have a cell phone without a global supply chain that runs from the kids who work slave labor in the Eastern Congo to the chip factory in Taiwan, to the people who put it together and market it, to the person who's working at the cell phone store around the corner. If you look at a cell phone, or what we were talking about, that you can put more technology in a cell phone now than they had available to go to the moon in the 1960s. For people to look at that and not marvel at this product of universal human global cooperation, of human labor and ingenuity in this fashion, then, you know, how else would they look at it? And people instead look at it as the brain child of a Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. So they make it about what they're hoping for here. What's hopeful about this paragraph is that all the bullshit, so to speak, all the stuff where people make claims that are saying things have to stay the way they are because they've always been like that, are going to become less and less plausible because everything constantly changes and has to. So with that old established authority that claims that it has power since it's always been in charge, that's also going to go away. And to say that people will be compelled to face each other with sober senses and to face their reality, their real conditions of life with sober senses, that is an ideal of the Enlightenment, right? That's a scientific / political hope. You look around and you're like, what are we doing here? You know, why are we doing it like this? How should we be doing it? What are we going to do about it? You know, so, and that didn't come to pass, but they nevertheless seem to think it's implied in capitalism. It's going to open people's eyes to reality, going to empower them to become, to realize that they're the agents, that they're the authors of this change and of these wonders, of these technological wonders. Anyway.
Wait, did we finish reading for 20 minutes?
Oh, yeah, time just flies when you're having fun. I don't know. It doesn't tell me how long it's been recorded. Anyway, we've been talking about the consequences of this revolutionary mode of production for social and cultural authority in the West, that it tends to undermine conservative ideas and aspirations. And so the next paragraph, the next long paragraph, is more about global things, like the relation between center and periphery, not so much the relations between culture producers and the masses in the center. So let's put a cut here.
About those types of people and situations, in my opinion, coming where I come from, right? It was ingrained in me from the time I was like 3 or 4 who I was named after. You could look up, you probably know who the guy is, Nathan Bedford Forrest. You know his history.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Okay, but once I started getting older and started moving away from that stuff, I was like, oh, this motherfucker did this stuff. Whoa. You know, yeah, I heard like it's heroic because he was the founder of the Klan or whatever. That's why they named me after him. But then you look at him, that dude was a bastard. But then it's like, let's see his counterparts. What was that guy about? What was this guy about? You know, and I went down that whole road. You know,
Who was his counterpart?
There is like on Twitter there was like people completely bearing down on this poor girl who was like 20 and had been born and raised to be a fascist, and people were like, oh no, you're just taking it, you know, you're once a fascist, always a fascist. I think that is the worst, because when you have that in your background, you know, when you've seen the abyss, when you've seen the beast in its glory, you know what it is about, and then you can really use that for a critique because you've seen the weakness of it, you've seen the whole thing. And people who've never had any actual close encounters with fascism, either as people who were running along with it or who were, you know, witnessing it, have it easy to say, oh, you know, once you've been tainted by that, you're gone for our cause. You can no longer be an ally or whatever. It's so short-sighted. And
I'm all about full disclosure with everybody, and you know, it's been I'm almost 43, and I quit being around those people at 17, so it's more than half my life. I've been working on causes and movements on the other side. I was raised in that, you know. It wasn't like you had a choice, you know, but that's perspective.
But what counts is what you do when you do have the choice. Once you have the choice.
I mentioned Malcolm X and how I read his autobiography when I was really young, and how he basically changed himself multiple times. The first time when he went into prison, and they put the bleach on his hair, right? And then later when he decided to leave the Nation of Islam. But just that whole thought just taught me redemption, and I shouldn't, you know, like, people can change.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as long as we leave a pathway for people to change, you know, it takes a lot of courage to me to say, this is who I was. And to me, that's an indication of some level of honesty. Like, this is who I was. This is everything I was and what I believed. I'm going to work on something different.
That huge step of leaving that behind, that count for something, you know. I'm not saying, oh, every Nazi is just somebody who needs the right kind of love in order to be, because that's a misunderstanding.
Let's not try to spare every Nazi because they might change like in 7 years.
No.
that was my
shit.
So, did you guys have you talked about the stuff that happened in Atlanta?
No, I haven't talked about that yet.
No, but I was telling Genghis that Lars and I had been talking on the last podcast about patriarchy and fascism, and how patriarchal ideals like incels and proud white ideology, all that stuff is like a tenet of fascism in terms of gender roles and, you know, authoritarian stuff. And
so it would make sense, are you saying, for a neo-Nazi to kill what is
he was they're saying that he claimed it was not about race, that he'd actually visited those places, and it was more like a revenge spree.
He said it drove him to temptation because he's a porn and sex addict.
That cop,
and it could be linked to like his ideas of subservient women or whatever, Asian women or something, but
he was headed to Florida when they got him. He was gonna go do it again.
Yeah, what's in Florida?
More massage parlors, I guess. There's strip clubs all over Florida too. That's all I remember from the place besides Disney World.
Wall to wall, I know.
He didn't go to Atlanta's top strip club because there's that one. I don't know if you guys know. It's like world famous. It's where all those trap rappers came from. That one strip club in Atlanta. Like, but I'm glad that he didn't go there because it's right there in Atlanta. But
it was probably not Asian enough for his liking.
They're predominantly African American dancers.
There's sort of
I think they'll be able to make a hate crime case even though the cop said it wasn't racially motivated once they go through his hard drives. Bet me on that.
It's going to be one of those weird fetish hate crimes.
Yeah,
like, because they usually think of hate crimes as like just outright singular hatred without any kind of ulterior other motives and stuff. But there's definitely some those guys fetishize Asian women specifically, you know, and it's like a fixation that's based on hatred and their patriarchal ideology and stuff. So
what about that other guy, Andrew what's his face, who was the Daily Stormer webpage owner?
Oh yeah,
his girlfriends were all Asian. He lived in the Philippines for a while.
Well, there's that weird shit with the far right wingers and the hentai and all that weird shit and anime and the fucking like they troll eat the rich. This is how I learn right wing motherfuckers. If it's an anime avatar talking shit in the comments, it's probably a right wing white guy somewhere in the United States. Seriously, like years of going through eat the rich comments. If it's an anime avatar, it's probably a troll and it's probably some 4chan white guy, right wing person, and in the US specifically.
I've been editing and modding pages in social media for almost 20 years. And yeah, those anime guys, they're going to come up with a libertarian talking point because they like me. and then they're going to talk about their guns, and then they're going to say something racist.
I
This is
wonder
almost 20
how.
years of moderating pages.
The
I wonder how.
libertarians specifically, they're
I wonder how if the like a lot of those communities are, you know, they have this the model minority kind of theory, and for a while now, I think a lot of Asian communities maybe have not gotten a brunt, or maybe have not feared as much some of the institutions and ideas that are like kind of baked into the United States. I wonder how if that's going to change.
well, in
That's
I
Fresno,
think it. Sorry, go ahead.
there's actually different Southeast Asian. It's in the Central Valley. They are already like targeted as gang members by police, and are it's like entirely different when I meet somebody from, you know, a Japanese background. It's like completely a separate life experience almost. Like I would consider Southeast Asians specifically closer in terms of life experience in Fresno, the same as like a Latino
Blacks
or a
yeah. I lived in neighborhoods in LA County where like the Cambodians and the Vietnamese, they were treated rough. The cops would roll up on them like they would the brothers or the essays.
I've been in classrooms where I've been like the only brown person, you know, and it's like an AP class. And then I've been in classes where I'm the only one that gets to leave the classroom to go to a nicer classroom, but they all look like me, you know. So definitely it's definitely a little bit different in the Central Valley because we have so many specifically Hmong immigrants from the CIA Secret Wars, but a lot of them live on the west side next to in the redlined area with Black and brown people, you know, so it's like their life experience was the same too, so it's a little different, and they weren't perceived as like the model minority or anything.
The thing though, I remember 23 years ago when I was living in Silicon Valley, anti-Asian racism was ubiquitous, and I remember going to a student event, and there was like a songwriter kid there with his guitar who was Asian, and he had a song about Michelle Kwan, who was, I think she was an ice skater or a gymnast.
Yeah, I think
Ice skater.
Did quite well.
I liked her when I was young.
And yeah, and the whole point of this song was him being like, she's an American, I am an American too, just like me and you, you know. So it's like, we're part of this. And people were like moved to tears and applauded. And so that was a point that had to be made at this time. It wasn't normal for Asians to be part of the mainstream. And my friend from Germany, who was there with me, dated an Asian American guy. And the stuff she told me when they went out to bars, the moment he turned his back, like went to get more beer or whatever, the white men would turn to her and be like, how can you be such a race traitor? You know, why don't you make white babies with me? You know, that's like that was their pickup line. Apparently, they thought that would be a good one. I mean, and this was at the height of the tech boom in the Silicon Valley. Like when you were in San Jose, I guess that's about the same time. Right, when it was sort of the image was it's open to the world, it's cosmopolitan, it's the cutting edge of technological progress, and yet it was just the rawest racism right at smack at the center of that, you know, anti-Asian specifically, anti-Asian racism. I think if anything there was a lull, a break. We were too busy being racist against everybody else that they kind of forgot about Asians, and now it's kind of back to that.
You know, there is so being kind of like my grandmother on one side was from India, so I present like I'm East Indian to people constantly, and they will tell me so, right? Like when I first meet them, like even people who are East Indian themselves, they'll be like, you are from India. I'm like, I'm not from India, I'm from Fresno, but I guess so, my DNA, whatever. But the point was that I grew up looking kind of not necessarily Latina, in kind of a very in a city that was racist against Latinas, and I experienced being brown, but like a model minority in a way, to some extent. I think that's how I was perceived in my like AP classes and stuff, was because I didn't look like I was, they assumed I was always, you know, from India or whatever. And there was maybe a couple, and they were from a nice neighborhood, you know, they were rich, they had wealthy parents and stuff. Then 9/11 happened though. And then I got perceived as Middle Eastern. So that wasn't fun.
That is
Wow.
a funny thing, because I've had a similar experience in my life. Because I go in New York City, most of the it's you know, Latino is just like this made up thing, and you've got,
Yeah.
but most of them the people that are there that would be from Puerto Rico and all the Caribbean islands. A lot of them that speak Spanish are more of like a olive tone, have some European features, and then my mother and then family were from Honduras, and so we have this Indian slash, like more of a indigenous kind of features, and maybe like and then maybe some of the eyes would maybe be somewhat different. Like I've been told like, hey, you look Filipino or something like that. And so there's this weird thing of how you present to how other people's expectations of what you look like can then change how they treat you from one place to another. And it's just like, okay, here we treat you like a Latino and how we expect you to treat you. And over here, we'll treat you more like at first like an Asian, and then we find out you speak Spanish, and then you go back to the other treatment. It's just this weird thing that is all throughout my life. And then you add the part where my dad was Muslim and 9/11 happened, and then I noticed all my stuff started to get like, my bags would always get like, your stuff is inspected. Your stuff is inspected.
Secondary. I was treated slightly better because I was brown, but I wasn't like, they didn't affiliate me with like the gangs that were in Fresno. So they were like, maybe she's like with, you know, those, you know, the doctor people that live on that side of town or whatever. And I wasn't. But then 9/11 happened, and then it was like, okay, now I am kind of not getting in, because I was in San Jose at the time, so I was new anyways. It was not fun. It was like I was either talking in like kind of a Becky voice, or if you got me mad enough, I talk like I would in my neighborhood. If like, you know, you get up on me and like you don't get on my face, and it's been like a long ass time, you know, like, and then became anyways. But
that's
so
funny.
It's either Becky voice or that. And
like my grandfather always used to fall into the Berlin street slang when he got upset.
What does that sound?
I can't make that in English. It's really my uncle who emigrated here. He could do it in English. He could, and he not deliberately. He just had a Berlin. One of my students this week concluded her mandatory reflection post on the forum for my class with the words, "Anyway, eat the rich."
no
Really?
way.
Wow.
Very proud of our page.
When I was in San Jose, I read Mumia's like prison. I don't know what it was, but something he wrote in prison.
From death row.
I think so. And then when I came back to Fresno, I was already radicalized at like 19 or whatever. And then me and my friend, one time we went to go tag up, because we would always go smoke weed in Clovis dressed up in little skirts, because we knew nobody would bug us, like the cops wouldn't pull us over. So we go over there at like 19 years old, and we eventually decided to tag up the Clovis side of town. So we did, and one thing that I did was I tagged Free Mumia on the back of this large shopping center that had like a brick wall in front of it, and I tagged Free Mumia in a fist. And we also tagged a weed plant and legalized this in the adjacent park bathroom. And then the next night, they'd already fucking hired a security guard patrolling the neighborhood, like a private security guard, because Clovis is white and Republican. But anyways, that Mumia kind of started kind of my like little guerrilla art form that I like to do.
I was taught about him by my 12th grade history teacher. He was from India, and I was in a continuation school, and he gave me stuff to read on him back in '96. I credit that for moving me towards the left. And then I saw that incident at El Glala. The documentary from the same teacher had me watch that. And then I was like, that's no different than Ruby Ridge. Why are these guys in prison? And then, I started going on and further and further. And like, but yeah, those two helped radicalize me.
That's wild. Yeah, but they painted over that so fast. They painted over like the Clovis graffiti, whatever. They painted over it, and then that park or that complex hired a security guard by the end of the next day to patrol it, because we went back out there just to either do it again or eat picnic, and we saw that they had guards out there, so we just ate a picnic. And we were like, okay, guess we gotta go, because they've got a guard out here now. They had also installed cameras, which are still up there to this day, which our point when we did it, they installed cameras so that they could see everybody walking into the bathroom.
I don't know if it's paranoia or not, but I assume everything's being filmed and everybody's being recorded.
You're actually being recorded right now. I mean, that's...
Well, yeah.
I assume everything's being listened to. Everybody's
always have.
It's a panopticon, right?
We used to. It is. When I was at Johns Hopkins, we used it to our advantage, because we really didn't have the manpower, nor the numbers, nor the time to pull off a protest. We were trying to pressure the university to start negotiating with the union for the janitors, but there was a big fundraiser event coming up with alumni that they really didn't want disturbed. So we knew they were monitoring our email on the Hopkins accounts. So we started chatter, pretending, creating the Potemkin village, that we were planning something big. And then after 2 days of that, the chief of security emailed us and was like, okay, let's talk. What do you want? What are your demands?
Oh my God. You saber rattled them.
So hold up, but how'd you you just did it through email, or you just talking?
We emailed, and in the emails, we basically went on the assumption, we created this whole charade that we were going to have a major event to disrupt this alumni thing. And that took all of 2 days for them to be like, all right, that's not going to happen. What do they want? Let's find that out. That's the price we can pay.